You ever come home with something brand new, something you've worked hard for, and before you even get to enjoy it, someone else tries to take control of it? That's exactly what happened to me the day I brought home my brand new Ford. It still had the showroom scent. The plastic wrap was still on the seats. I hadn't even driven it twice. And yet somehow, within 24 hours, my HOA's self-declared queen, let's just call her Karen, decided that she had authority over it. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Sun was out. I had just parked in my own driveway, sipping coffee and admiring how good the Ford looked with that deep blue finish. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Karen, walking briskly toward my house, clipboard in one hand, sunglasses perched like she owned the sun. I already knew something ridiculous was coming. It always did when Karen showed up. She didn't even say hello. Didn't ask if I was home. She walked straight past me and toward the car. I thought maybe she wanted to check for a parking decal. But nope. This woman, without hesitation, pulled a key from her pocket. She looked around like she was about to do something heroic, then jabbed the key into my car door. I stood up, slowly stunned. For a moment, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. But nope. She twisted that key again, and again, yanking at the handle. Nothing happened. The car didn't open. The alarm didn't go off. Just this weird silence while she mumbled to herself and jiggled the handle like she'd lost her mind. I finally said, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" She turned around like I was the one interrupting her business. And then, with this completely straight face, she said, "This vehicle doesn't belong here. It doesn't have HOA clearance. I'm authorized to move it." I blinked. Authorized how? She held up the key like it was some magic wand. "This is a master key. The board has access to all community vehicles." Now listen, I've heard some wild things from HOA board members before. I've seen citations for grass too green and curtains too colorful. But never had someone told me they had a master key to cars. And if she did, why was she using it on my brand new Ford, which had never been part of the HOA's fleet, wasn't registered with them, and sure as heck didn't belong to anyone but me? I calmly asked her to step away. She didn't. Instead, she yanked the key out and got loud. "You need to comply with HOA vehicle policy. I'm giving you an official warning." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. I reached into my pocket, unlocked the car with the remote fob, and opened the door myself. That should have ended it. But of course it didn't. Karen whipped out her phone. "You're interfering with HOA enforcement," she shouted. "I'm calling the police." Now let's take a moment here. Imagine watching someone try to unlock your car with their key, fail, then accuse you of being the problem. I didn't even try to stop her. I just stood there, arms crossed, letting it all play out. I knew this wasn't going to go the way she thought. She dialed. She reported me for refusing to comply and threatening her with aggression, even though I hadn't taken a single step toward her. She described me and the vehicle, gave my address, and even claimed I had modified a community-owned asset. I could tell she truly believed her own story. That's what made it worse. She wasn't trying to bluff. She thought she was in the right. And so I waited. Police were on their way. My neighbors peeked through blinds. Some even stood in their yards. The show was about to begin. And Karen? She stood tall like she was about to get me kicked out of my own home. But here's the thing about people like her. Sooner or later, they push the wrong button. They pick the wrong fight. And when the cops did show up, something happened that wiped the smirk clean off her face. The moment the police cruiser rolled up, Karen's whole posture changed. She stood straighter, waved her arms, and marched up to them like she was the one who called a meeting. "Officers! Over here!" she shouted, pointing directly at me like I'd just stolen the car I was leaning on. Now, I've dealt with my fair share of HOA drama, but this was new. One officer stayed by the car while the other approached Karen with a calm voice. "Ma'am, what seems to be the problem?" She jumped right into her performance. "He's in possession of a vehicle that doesn't belong to him. It's a community violation. I attempted to enforce HOA access and he resisted. He even tried to intimidate me." The officer nodded slowly. "Okay, ma'am. Let's take it step by step. Is this your vehicle?" Karen hesitated, then said something wild. Well, not mine, technically. But it belongs to the HOA and the HOA governs all vehicles on this street. I couldn't help but laugh. The officer turned to me and asked, "Sir, do you have proof of ownership for this vehicle?" Without saying a word, I opened the glove box and pulled out my paperwork. Title, registration, insurance. All fresh, all in my name. I handed it over calmly while Karen looked like she just swallowed a lemon whole. The officer reviewed it, then looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, this paperwork clearly shows he owns the vehicle. And it's legally parked in his own driveway." Karen wasn't done. "But he hasn't registered it with the HOA. That violates our vehicle policy. We have master keys for community enforcement." I'm pretty sure the officer had heard enough by then. "A master key doesn't give you the right to access someone's private property," he said. "Especially not their personal car. That's trespassing." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She blinked. Then she turned the crazy up another level. "Are you serious? I am a board member. We have responsibilities. He could be storing unauthorized items in there." That was the moment I saw the second officer subtly step around to her side. Not aggressively. Just close enough. "Ma'am, did you try to enter the vehicle without his permission?" the officer asked. Karen's voice wavered. They attempted a key check. Just to make sure everything was compliant. "That's standard." He nodded once. "That's not your right, ma'am. Especially not on private property. You attempted to access a locked car with a key that wasn't yours. That's attempted unauthorized entry." Now she was losing it. "So what?" "I was doing my job." The officer's voice got firmer. "Your job does not include trying to unlock someone else's vehicle without their consent. That's not HOA business. That's criminal." I stood silently, arms crossed, watching this unfold like a movie. I wasn't smug. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just amazed at how deep she dug herself in. And it only got worse. Because then the officer asked, "Where did you get that key you used?" Karen hesitated again. "It's the HOA's community access key. We had it made for emergencies." The officer glanced at me. "Did you give anyone permission to try opening your car with a key?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not." That's when they told her to turn around. Karen gasped. "What? You're arresting me?" "For doing my job." The second officer stepped forward, calm but direct. "Ma'am, we're detaining you for attempted unauthorized entry and misuse of a key on private property. You have the right to remain silent." I couldn't believe it. There she was, handcuffed in front of the very house she tried to control. The same driveway she tried to dominate with her fake authority. Neighbors had come out by now. Phones were recording. Karen was still trying to argue, but her voice cracked between words. "You're making a mistake. I know the HOA president. I am the board." One officer simply said, "And that doesn't place you above the law." They walked her to the car. Slowly, carefully, with every eye on her. And I stood there, not saying a word. Just watching karma arrive right on schedule. After the police car drove off with Karen in the back seat, the street was dead silent. No more shouting. No more threats. Just the sound of wind brushing across the trees and a few neighbors awkwardly backing into their homes. I stood there by my Ford, still gripping the paperwork I'd shown the officer. It was like the final scene of a wild movie, but somehow I wasn't surprised. Because with Karen, it was never just one incident. This had been building for months. You see, Karen wasn't new to drama. She had a reputation in our neighborhood. People joked about her having a clipboard holster, like she never went anywhere without it. She made herself the unofficial sheriff of the HOA, always quoting rules, demanding compliance, and calling emergency meetings over things like porch lights being too bright or kids playing with sidewalk chalk. But this was a new level even for her. After everything calmed down, I walked back into my house and sat down. I needed a moment to process what just happened. I replayed the entire situation in my head, from her marching up with a fake master key to her insisting she had authority over my property, and finally to her being handcuffed on my driveway. It was absurd. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about power, or at least, the illusion of it. HOAs are meant to keep neighborhoods orderly and clean. That's the idea, at least. But in the wrong hands, that power becomes a tool for control. Karen had convinced herself that her position gave her unlimited access to everyone's lives. Driveways, doors, backyards, nothing was off-limits in her mind. And the worst part? Some people actually listened to her. Just a few weeks before this whole thing with my Ford, Karen had sent out emails claiming that residents needed to provide duplicate house keys to the HOA for safety purposes. Some folks were uncomfortable but afraid to speak up. Others thought it was just a misunderstanding. I didn't say much then, but now it all made sense. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was collecting control. One door at a time. Later that evening, a neighbor from down the block knocked on my door. Let's call him Steve. He looked nervous, almost like he expected me to slam the door. But I invited him in. He sat down and quietly said, "I saw the whole thing. Honestly, I'm glad it happened. Someone had to stop her." Steve then told me something that blew my mind. Karen had once tried to unlock his side gate with a similar key, claiming it blocked the emergency fire path. He never reported it because she backed off quickly when his dog barked. But the point was clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. More neighbors started talking. One woman down the street said Karen had threatened to fine her for hoarding because she had bulk groceries delivered during the pandemic. Another family said Karen had taken photos of their backyard through the fence. Everyone had a story, but no one had stood up until now. Funny how it takes one bold moment to shake people awake. I didn't post about it online. I didn't gloat. But word spread. The next HOA meeting? People who hadn't attended in years showed up. Quiet voices suddenly had questions. And just like that, Karen's power, the fake kind she built on intimidation and bluffs, started to crumble. The board had to hold an emergency vote. And guess what? Karen's position was suspended while the investigation moved forward. Turns out her master key wasn't authorized. It was copied behind closed doors and never logged. And the locksmith who made it? He confirmed she claimed it was for private access during emergencies, but never showed documents. Things were changing. You could feel it in the neighborhood. People weren't just watching from their windows anymore. They were speaking, asking questions, reading the HOA bylaws, some for the first time. It was like the entire street finally remembered that they were the homeowners, not Karen. And as for me, I didn't need to do anything else. I had my car. I had my peace. And most importantly, I had the truth, backed up by paperwork, witnessed by police, and supported by neighbors who were finally ready to stop whispering and start standing. A few days after the incident, I was out watering my front lawn when I noticed something odd. The HOA bulletin board by the community mailbox had a brand new notice, bold red letters at the top, asterisk, temporary suspension of board member. Asterisk Karen's name was right there. It felt surreal. This was the woman who used to post 3 notices a week about minor things like trash bin placement and unauthorized lawn ornaments. And now she was the headline. What really got me, though, was how quickly the atmosphere changed. The neighborhood had a different energy. For once, people weren't avoiding eye contact. They were waving, stopping by to chat. It was like Karen's grip had finally loosened. For months, maybe years, people had been quietly playing defense, afraid she'd report them for every minor thing. But now, that fear? It was fading fast. Later that same afternoon, I saw a small group gathered in front of Steve's house. Curious, I walked over. Turned out, it was an impromptu meeting, a handful of neighbors sharing their own Karen stories. One woman, Sarah, said Karen had once demanded she repaint her mailbox because the color was not HOA approved. Another guy, Brian, told us Karen had reported his teenage son for loitering because he was skateboarding in their own driveway. Everyone had a story, and everyone had kept quiet until now. That's when I realized how much damage she'd done, not just to me, but to the whole community. People had been isolated, afraid to speak up, constantly second-guessing harmless decisions like leaving patio lights on after 9 p.m. The HOA, under Karen's so-called leadership, had gone from a neighborhood guide to a personal weapon. And we'd all just accepted it. But now things were different. For the first time, people were organizing, not out of fear, but from shared frustration. Someone suggested we form a residence committee, something separate from the HOA board, just to keep everything transparent. No more secret fines. No more unexplained rule changes. Just open communication. I offered to help. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted balance. Order is fine, rules are fine, but they should protect the community, not control it. That weekend, we held our first unofficial community meeting on Steve's front lawn. Folding chairs, lemonade pitchers, and more than 20 people showed up. Honestly, I didn't expect half that number. Some had never even spoken to each other before. But now, we were all sitting in one circle, finally talking. We took turns sharing ideas, like getting access to the actual HOA bylaws, proposing limits on board authority, and demanding an audit of recent fines and key usage. Someone even suggested mandatory training for future board members so people like Karen couldn't use the title as a personal badge of power again. While all this was going on, Karen hadn't been seen much. Her car was gone. Her porch light stayed off. Some said she was out of town. Others thought she was just lying low, hoping everything would blow over. But it wasn't blowing over. Because the board had called for an official vote. Not just to suspend her, but to permanently remove her from any HOA leadership role. When the ballot notice went out, I was shocked at how fast people responded. Ballots were turned in early. Neighbors who usually ignored HOA mail were now walking their votes directly to the drop box. It felt like something bigger than just removing one person. It felt like a reset. The day of the vote count, I stood near the community center with a few neighbors, just talking, trying to act casual. But deep down, we were all watching that results table like it was election night. The HOA president read the final numbers out loud. With a 78% majority, Karen has been officially removed. You could feel the tension drop like a stone. No clapping. No cheering. Just silence, followed by long, relieved exhaling. I glanced around at the people I'd once only nodded at from across the street. Now they were smiling. We were no longer just homeowners. We were a community again. Not because we all agreed on everything, but because we finally had a voice. And we'd finally used it. It wasn't long after Karen was officially removed from the HOA board that things started to feel normal again. The kind of normal we hadn't had in years. People were walking their dogs without looking over their shoulders. Kids were riding bikes without being told their helmets were non-compliant. You could finally leave your trash bin out for more than 10 minutes without getting a violation notice stuffed in your mailbox. But while things were calm on the outside, I knew it wasn't really over, not yet. There was still something that bothered me. Something we hadn't talked about during all the meetings and votes. The so-called master key Karen had used on my Ford. That key had opened a door, not to my vehicle, but to a much bigger question. How many copies existed? Who else had access? And how long had this been going on? I decided to follow up with the HOA board, not out of anger, but because the trust needed to be rebuilt. At the next meeting, I asked directly, is there any record of master keys being issued to board members? The current president looked confused. We don't issue keys for personal vehicles. Only shared spaces like the pool gate or clubhouse storage. That answer confirmed everything I feared. Karen hadn't used an authorized tool. She had a copy made without permission. And she had used it like a weapon. Not just against me, but potentially against others. Who knows how many times she walked around trying her key on things that didn't belong to her. The board agreed to launch a formal inquiry. A local locksmith was brought in to review all known locks and match any key types Karen may have used. A few weeks later, a quiet update was shared. 2 unauthorized copies had been confirmed. One of them matched the brand and cut of the key she used on my car. The other? Still unaccounted for. That finding changed everything. It wasn't just an abuse of power anymore. It was a breach of security. The board acted fast. Every lock on shared facilities was changed. A new policy was put in place. No single board member could carry or duplicate keys without full documentation, approval, and a witness present during any emergency entry. All key activity would now be logged and time-stamped. And then, a surprising detail came to light. Karen had once been in charge of the HOA's maintenance scheduling. That included arranging locksmith visits, controlling access cards, and even storing backup garage codes for emergency use. The board had trusted her. No one questioned it. But now, people were asking what else she may have accessed. Steve, my neighbor, came over one evening with a strange look on his face. He told me that a few months back, he'd come home to find his garage door halfway open. He thought maybe it was just a glitch. But now, thinking about it in hindsight, maybe it wasn't. Another neighbor, Rachel, said her garden shed had been mysteriously unlocked one weekend. She'd found her ladder moved and a few tools left out. She thought it was her kids at first, but they denied it. Everyone was questioning what had actually been happening under our noses. It was unsettling, but at the same time, it brought people together. We weren't just fixing a policy issue, we were reclaiming control. A new resident security committee was formed, made up of volunteers, not just board members. We installed motion sensor lights in vulnerable areas. We updated surveillance coverage near entrances. And most importantly, we made sure no one, ever again, could hold unchecked power over the rest of us. Something shifted in the culture of the neighborhood. The fear that had been quietly living behind everyone's front door began to fade. And in its place, a new sense of awareness and responsibility took root. Not paranoia, just protection. I started to notice things I hadn't seen in years. Barbecues in front yards. People chatting at the mailbox. Kids racing scooters down the street without being scolded. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't need to be. It just needed to feel like home again. And while Karen's name was no longer on any board document, her story had become something else, something we all remembered. Not because of the drama, but because of what it revealed. How easy it is for power to be misused when no one's watching. And how quickly that power collapses when even just one person dares to stand up and say, "Not anymore." It had been a few weeks since the storm passed, and life around the neighborhood was finally finding its rhythm again. But then, out of nowhere, Karen came back. It was a quiet Thursday morning. I had just finished some yard work when I spotted a familiar silver SUV slowly rolling down the street. I almost didn't recognize it at first, but then I saw her behind the wheel, oversized sunglasses on, lips pursed like she'd just bitten into a raw lemon. She didn't stop. Didn't wave. Just drove past like nothing had ever happened. But something had changed, and not just in her. The neighborhood was different now, and she could feel it too. Later that evening, I got a knock on the door. It was Rachel, holding her phone with the screen turned toward me. "She's back," she said. The neighborhood group chat was already lighting up. People were sharing photos and messages. Karen's SUV had been spotted circling twice. No one said she did anything illegal. She didn't get out of her car. She didn't confront anyone. But the tension was real. Like a shadow returning after you finally opened all the windows. That same night, I got a message from Steve, "Want to walk the block with me?" We didn't say it out loud, but we both knew what he meant. Just a friendly patrol. Just to remind everyone, especially Karen, that the neighborhood didn't belong to her anymore. As we walked past the houses, we noticed more lights on. Curtains pulled back. People were watching. Not out of fear this time, but alertness. Community awareness had replaced silence. Karen's game didn't work anymore because no one was playing along. A few days later, the HOA board held another meeting, this time to address community safety and privacy concerns. Even though Karen was no longer part of the board, she still technically lived in the neighborhood, at least part-time. People were nervous. No one wanted revenge, but no one wanted a repeat of what had happened either. That's when someone suggested a community code of conduct, not just for board members, but for everyone. A set of expectations that protected people's rights, privacy, and property, regardless of HOA status. It wasn't about punishing Karen. It was about making sure no one could ever pull what she did again. And just like that, the focus shifted again, from frustration to prevention. We started drafting the new code that week, and the best part? It wasn't done behind closed doors. Every resident had a say. Ideas were collected, reviewed, and voted on. We talked about security measures, key control policies, personal space boundaries, and even respectful communication rules. People showed up. Not because they had to, but because they finally cared again. Meanwhile, Karen stayed silent. No calls, no emails, no threats. She had lost her grip. And the more the neighborhood organized, the more obvious it became that she wasn't coming back, not in the way she once ruled. If anything, she had become a lesson. One weekend, I saw her walking alone near the end of the street. No clipboard, no phone in hand. Just walking. I nodded politely. She didn't nod back. But that was fine. I wasn't looking for drama. I had already won. Not through shouting, not through revenge, but by staying calm, standing my ground, and letting the truth unfold on its own. Even after all that happened, I never hated Karen. What I felt was disappointment. That someone could have used her position to bring neighbors together, but instead chose to divide them. That someone trusted with leadership used it for ego instead of service. But at least now, her story served a better purpose. It helped everyone wake up. One neighbor put it best during the last meeting. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "It's not about what Karen did. It's about what we allowed, until we didn't." That stuck with me. Because the truth is, communities don't fall apart because of one loud voice. They fall apart when the rest of us stop speaking. When we let fear, or indifference, or discomfort keep us from standing up. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one line crossed, to finally bring everyone together again. So, even though Karen had returned to the street, her power hadn't. The control she once held? Gone. Replaced by something much stronger, unity. And that was something no fake master key could ever unlock. One afternoon, about a month after everything had settled down, I was cleaning out my garage when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there she was, Karen, standing just outside the driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, watching me like I was about to commit a crime with a broom in my hand. For a second, neither of us said anything. She didn't look angry. She didn't look embarrassed. If anything, she looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. Like she knew something had shifted, and she wasn't quite sure how to get it back. She finally spoke. "I heard there's a new security committee." I nodded slowly, wiping my hands on a rag. "Yeah. Residents started it after what happened." She looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I wasn't trying to harm anyone, you know." I leaned against the garage frame and studied her face. There wasn't an apology in her tone, but there wasn't defiance either. Just a strange sort of emptiness. "You tried to open my car without asking," I said. "You called the cops on me. That's not just overstepping. That's crossing a line." "I thought I was doing the right thing," she muttered. "Enforcing the rules." I didn't respond immediately. I just let the silence hang in the air like fog. Then I said, "Rules don't mean anything if they're only used to control people. You lost sight of that." Karen didn't argue. She just gave a short nod, the kind people give when they know there's nothing left to say. She turned and started walking away. No clipboard. No warnings. Just a quiet, lonely walk back down the sidewalk that used to feel like her personal runway. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. Like we had finally closed a chapter that had been way too long and way too loud. The neighborhood continued healing in small ways. Little changes here and there. The new code of conduct passed with overwhelming support. Every resident got a printed copy. Key control logs were now visible to everyone through a secure online portal. Meetings were recorded. Fines had to be reviewed and approved by at least 3 board members before being issued. And more importantly, we started celebrating the things we used to overlook. Neighbors organized a block party, something we hadn't done in years. Tables lined the street. Kids played in inflatable bounce houses. Someone even brought a karaoke machine, and yes, I was forced into singing a horribly off-key version of Sweet Home Alabama. But it wasn't about the party. It was about people finally feeling like they belonged again. One of the most unexpected changes was how often people actually started helping each other. Steve and his son mowed an elderly neighbor's yard without being asked. Rachel baked cookies for the entire street and left them on porches with handwritten notes. Even the quiet guy at the end of the block, the one who never came to meetings, showed up to volunteer for weekend watch duty. We weren't just a group of homes anymore. We were a community. One that had been shaken, yes, but also one that had stood up, dusted itself off, and learned how to take care of itself. And every time I pulled into my driveway, I looked at that Ford, the one Karen had tried to reclaim with her fake key, and it reminded me of what kicked all of this off. Just a car. Just a moment. But it was enough. Enough to expose everything hiding under the surface. The fear, the silence, the power games. Once they were brought into the light, they didn't stand a chance. Because when people stop letting one voice control the room, it's amazing how quickly everything changes. It's not about revenge. It's not about punishment. It's about remembering who the neighborhood really belongs to. The families who live there. The people who raise their kids there. The ones who work all week just to enjoy their Saturday morning in peace. And now, finally, we were getting that peace back. Together. It was a calm Sunday morning when I found myself sitting on my front porch, sipping coffee and watching a couple of kids play tag across the street. Something about the laughter, the easy rhythm of it, made me think about how far things had come. Not too long ago, this same street had been quiet, but not the peaceful kind. The tense kind. The kind where people stayed inside, avoided eye contact, and whispered about HOA drama behind closed doors. But that tension had dissolved. People waved again. They lingered in driveways, shared tools, traded gardening tips. I hadn't realized how much stress I'd gotten used to carrying until it finally wasn't there anymore. Steve walked over, hands in his pockets, and nodded toward the kids playing. Feels different now, doesn't it? I nodded. It does. He sat down beside me, and for a moment we just sat in silence, the good kind this time. Then he said, I heard Karen's putting her house on the market. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Yep. Signs going up tomorrow, according to Rachel. I didn't say anything right away. Just watched the wind rustle the trees. If that was true, it made sense. Karen had tried to return to the neighborhood, but her grip had vanished. No one feared her anymore. She had no more audience, no more control. And for someone like her, that had to be the worst possible outcome. Being ignored. And honestly, that was enough. She wasn't a threat anymore. She wasn't a leader. She was just another name in the HOA files, soon to be replaced by someone new, hopefully someone better. Steve changed the subject after that, asking about some new mulch I'd added to my front yard, and we talked like neighbors should, about small things. Real things. Nothing heavy. Nothing political. Just day-to-day life. But as the sun climbed higher and people started coming outside, I noticed something else too. A group of teenagers helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries. A couple repainting their fence together. A father teaching his kid to ride a bike down the middle of the street with training wheels clicking against the asphalt. All of it felt honest. Unforced. Like we were finally allowed to just live here without wondering who was watching, who was judging, who was waiting to send a fine in the mail. The new HOA board had been doing its job quietly and fairly. Rules still existed, but now they made sense. They were built around keeping things safe and fair, not around controlling every little thing. The Transparency Committee published monthly reports. Meetings were recorded and sent to residents. And best of all, people actually participated now. No more empty chairs. No more decisions made in silence. Even the board had started rotating responsibilities, so no single person could cling to power like Karen did. Everyone got a turn. Everyone had a voice. And it was working. At one point, my neighbor Rachel walked by with her dog and waved. You going to the fall festival next weekend? She asked. Wouldn't miss it, I said. She smiled. You should help with the setup crew. We need someone with truck space. I chuckled. Only if you promise not to make me carry the hay bales alone. Deal. She walked off, and I found myself smiling for no real reason. Just content. Peace wasn't dramatic. It didn't make headlines. But you knew when it was there. You could feel it in the little things, like laughter echoing down the street or neighbors asking for favors just because they could. I glanced over at my Ford, still parked proudly in the driveway. Still spotless. Still mine. A reminder of where this all started. One moment of overreach. One false sense of power. One woman trying to treat the neighborhood like her kingdom, and failing. That car never moved. But it shifted an entire community. And now, as I watched my street come alive again, I realized something else. Something I hadn't thought about before. Sometimes, it only takes one spark to light the fuse that burns away years of silence. One act that turns watchers into doers. And one story, no matter how ridiculous it seems, to wake everyone up. That spark had come and gone. But the fire it started? It built something better. Something real.